serious? What's the creepiest, scariest thing that you've seen but no one believes you? My one weird thing was this. Some friends and I were hanging out one summer's eve. We were around 15. It was night. Clear. And we were all lying on my friend's trampoline in the backyard. We were just all chatting and looking at the stars. Suddenly, we're all like, what the F? Did you just see that? We all swore we saw a formation of stars trade places with each other. They sort of left a tail, like a shooting star, before resettling in their new positions. They all moved at the exact same time. It was strange. 3 of us seemed to see the same thing. It was the night before my stepmom died, lost her battle to cancer. I was 22. Was spending the night in bed with my 9-year-old half-brother. Cuddling him and telling him his mom was gonna be okay. It wasn't gonna hurt anymore. It's about 3 AM at the time. And after a while he immediately sits upright in bed. Smiles. Says, I promise to be a good boy. Mommy, I love you. Now my stepmom has been bedridden for the last month. So she's not moving anywhere. But I swear on my life. And my little brother agrees with me. For a split second I saw her standing in the doorway wearing her big giant fur coat. Just smiling at us and just looking relieved. Brother went to sleep about 2 minutes later. I left to go into my dad and stepmom's room to check on her to see my dad awake and telling me she'd died about half an hour ago. I genuinely believe she stopped by on her way to the other side to check in on her 2 kids and make sure we'd be okay without her before she left. When I was a teenager I used to keep the remote to my stereo on the lip of my bed frame. One night around midnight I woke up to my stereo playing static at me. Only it was getting louder. I could see the volume number moving higher and higher. So it's pitch black and this static is getting louder and louder and the remote wasn't in its usual place for some reason. I had no choice but to jump out of bed to turn it off. I turned on the light and, freaking out, found it under my bed. Like, deep under my bed at that middle point that's super hard to reach. Did not like. When I was 16 I skipped school to stay home and play video games. I set up my PlayStation and made some hot pockets and right when I get good and comfortable I hear footsteps walking to my room. I glance outside and see my parents aren't home yet but was still afraid I was going to get caught. Seeing no place to hide I froze. Suddenly the door was flung open and I heard a blood-curdling scream echo through the house. I must have sat there petrified in that room for half an hour before going outside and waiting for my parents to come home. I tried to explain to my friends later what happened but they thought I was just pulling some bullshit from the internet. This'll teach that little schnot to eat my hot pockets. Your mom. Probably. Was walking through the Rockies and managed to tear the muscle on the side of my foot so was hobbling back. I was on my own like a moron. In the space of hobbling back to Jasper I saw a white bear, think they are called spirit bears, just sitting watching me. Literally thought F's sake I'm gonna die here mauled by a bear and no one knows where I am. But it just sat there and poured the dirt in the direction of the town. I limped on keeping an eye on it and it just watched me. Then I swear to God no more than 5 minutes later a terrifying wolf appears limping exactly on the same foot I'm limping on. Eyes me up and continues on its journey. I think I was even too pathetic to bother with is the moral of that story. I was petrified though either way. I was a missionary in South Africa. One of the creepiest things that happened to me was on New Year's Eve. During that night, I woke up feeling really thirsty. I walked toward the refrigerator in the kitchen. And as I was drinking water, I turned around and the front door was wide open. I could see the stars in the black sky and hear the faint sound of crickets in the distance. Not thinking anything of it, I closed it and went back to bed. In the morning, my missionary companion woke up first and noticed the door was wide open. It was then that we realized we had been robbed throughout the night. And I still remember my heart dropping as I realized the perpetrators were most likely in the dark house while I was in the kitchen in the middle of the night. Still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I was maybe 4 or 5. We lived in a somewhat questionable neighborhood at the time. And looking out the window one night I swear I saw a neighbor from an app nearby with her son. He was on one of those plastic trikes. I believe she ran inside to grab a jacket. In the 3 minutes she was gone. A vehicle pulled up and snatched the kid and took off. His mom came back and was looking for him. I tried to tell the adults in my act but no one believed me or the other kids with us. Still the scariest thing that haunts me to this day. Holy F, this is honestly the most terrible one I've read. I don't know what it was because I don't remember it. Because I was a baby toddler. But my mum certainly does and mentions it occasionally. I was her first kid. And when I was born my parents lived in a little old house in Scotland. Mum says that really quite often. Both I and the dog would stop whatever we were doing at the same time and both look towards the stairs as if we were watching something either descend or ascend them. This is corroborated by my dad and a few of their friends who saw it happening. It's basically their friend group's weird inexplicable story. I just happen to be an unwitting part of it. Unfortunately I have no memory of this at all and the dog in question died 30 years ago. So they'll never get their answer. Yeah, if the dog was still alive someone could have asked him what was going on. It's not that people don't believe me. It's more that I hardly believe it myself. It was late, probably between 1 and 3 AM, and I was sitting at an intersection waiting for the light to go green. Across from me was a dark road with trees on either side and thick woods off to the left and houses off to the right. So I'm sitting there listening to music when I see something move at the edge of the woods to the left. Now this is rural New Jersey, so things moving in the woods are either bears or deer, which aren't scary, but deer will F your car up if run out in front of you. I turned my high beams on to see what it was but they didn't reach the woods. Then I saw more movement before the light turned green. I made my left turn and drove off but I couldn't see what it was. The next day I drive the same route on my way to work and when I get to that intersection there's cops and ambulance over at the edge of the woods where I saw the movement the night before. I asked a co-worker what happened and he said they had found dismembered body parts there early that morning. My friend's grandma's house was right up against a cemetery. He always told me it was haunted and would see crazy stuff there but I never believed him. One night, we were over her house and I swear, I saw something the size of a toddler run from the living room, through the dining room and into the kitchen. When I looked at my friend he just went, "Did you just see that kid run through the effing house?" It looked more like a fast running shadow than an actual person. There was no one there. There were no kids around. It was his grandma's house and we were the only ones over. It was late at night and no doors opened or closed. When we told his grandma, she was just like, "Oh, don't worry about it. It happens all the time." After that, I started believing in ghosts. My friend also said when he used to sleep there, he used to push the spare room's TV away from him so it faced away from him because he would wake up at night and see people in the reflection staring back at him watching him sleeping. Scared the shit out of him. It was over 10 years ago now when a friend and I visited Japan. It was our first time there so we went with a tour company. However, after the tour ended we stayed an extra night in a hotel in East Ikebukuro. During the tour the tour leader tell us stories of haunted hotels and other urban myths, as you do over beers or when you're enjoying a late night onsen. One of the things he'd tell us was to be wary if you find a room where the head of the bed was positioned next to the window, so if you look up while lying in bed you look out the window. He'd try to scare us by saying in those rooms ghosts would come through the window at night and drag you out to your death. Back to the East Ikebukuro hotel. We check in the early evening and the first thing we notice is how small the room was. The second thing was they gave us a double bed instead of twin singles. The third, the bed head was right next to the window. We rationalized that the room was too small really to line the bed any other way and the tour leader was full of shh. To be honest we were more annoyed that we had to share a double bed, no homo. We decided to just let it go since it was just for one night. So we went out for dinner before turning in for the night. That night I get woken up by a door slamming shut and I jolt up. There, sitting at the foot of the bed, is a woman in a blue kimono. She had long hair and from what could make out, her kimono had butterflies on it. I freak out, dive and bury my head under my pillow. Looking back, that was a useless move if anything bad were to happen. I remember thinking, is this real? How can I check without looking? In my genius I decided to shuffle my foot down the bed thinking if I don't touch anything it's just my imagination. I didn't think about what I'd do if I did touch something. Little by little my foot moves down the bed when I notice that there is definitely a depression at the foot of the bed. Thing, was there. I retreat my foot. Start to sweat and at this point just start repeatedly saying the Lord's Prayer till I must have fainted or fallen back asleep. I remember waking up at 6 the next morning and my friend was already dressed and packed. I asked him if he saw or heard anything last night and all he says is I don't want to talk about it. Let's check out. Myself. Wife and kids were driving near some cliffs near where we live. We stopped to take in the view and some photos. I lined the kids up with the cliff drop and ocean behind them and took some pics. As they took a step back for me to get a better picture, they fell off the edge of the cliff. I woke up sweating and petrified. The nightmare felt so real. One of those that really stick with you. I went for a pee and checked in on all the kids. All fast asleep in bed. Apart from my youngest 5-year-old daughter. She was on the floor. She had fallen out of bed but somehow was still sleeping. Next to her on the floor knocked over I assume when she fell was a bedside lamp. The bulb from the lamp had burned was singeing into the carpet I think ready to burst into flames. Nice of your subconscious to wake you before the house went up in flames. Though. Was working at a convenience store. Late shift. Just about nobody comes in from about 10:45 until we close at midnight. The way the store is set up is. From behind the counter I'm about 6 feet from the door in front of me and to my left. And directly above it are 2 security monitors. It's a very small store. The monitors flip through a few different camera angles in the back. Just outside the front door. In the lot. In the shed. By the coolers. And then repeat the cycle again. I'm working by myself. Just me and my phone. 11 o'clock hits. Nobody comes in for a while. Probably 20 minutes of silence. Some time passes and I glance at the security monitor. It's showing the angle of the lot. And it shows in such a way that you could see someone's back as they enter the front door. And it's pretty dark out. So the best way to see if a customer's coming is to watch the cameras. It's at a slight delay. So I would see something happen on the monitors a second or two after it actually happened. When the angle from the lot comes back on, I see a man. From behind. Enter the front door. Black guy. Not too tall. Leather jacket. He's got a grocery bag in his right hand. I glance down at the front door. Which is just below the monitors. Nobody's there. I thought it was a glitch. Maybe an old tape replaying. I watch through another cycle of the camera angles which lasts about 45 seconds or so. Just to see if it would happen again. Halfway through the cycle. The door swings open and into the store steps a young man. Black guy. Not too tall. Wearing a leather jacket. He's holding a grocery bag in his right hand. The icing on the cake was that he didn't buy anything. He just looked around for a minute and left. Mind playing tricks on me I guess. But I was spooked out of my mind. Didn't work any more nights after that. Wow. Now I feel like I freaked out dozens of convenience store clerks as I pace to the door and back to the car. Arguing with myself whether the 500 calories in a home run pie is worth it or not for my late night cheat meal. When I was like 10 I talked to someone all the time through the like 6-inch tall slit window to our basement. He would always tell me not to go in the basement when I'd ask to see him cause he wouldn't be there anyway. Talked to him for a year and a half. Told me not to tell my mom cause he didn't want to scare her. A few years later I was telling my mom about the guy in the basement. I quit talking to him by then, and she told me she could believe me because when I was a baby she would always see my daughter my room open like someone was peeking in to see if I was alright and then shutting it quietly. Told me that she figured it was the guy who owned the house before us because that used to be his grandkid's room. It was one of those small towns where our grandparents knew each other.